Deep beneath the rainforest canopy, where light filters down in fractured beams, and every square inch seems alive with movement, the ground is never truly still. Roots knot through ancient soil, moisture gathers in warm pockets, and the air carries the layered scent of bark, decay, and unseen creatures. Down here, hidden between fallen leaves and tangled undergrowth, life operates according to rules older than memory. And within this world, the first signals of awakening begin long before the sun touches the forest floor. A soft tremor ripples through the humidity-thickened air. Then another. The vibrations echo across a mat of leaves, travel along corridors carved by countless footsteps, and bleed into chambers woven from soil and living bodies. Inside those dimly lit tunnels, a colony begins to stir. At first, the movement is subtle. An antenna twitch, a shift of weight, a leg extending through shadow. Then layers of workers unfurl like a breathing wall, aligning themselves into slow waves that grow more coordinated with every passing second. These creatures don't wake the way larger animals do. Instead, they seem to rise as one, driven by a collective urgency that pulses through the colony like a heartbeat. There is no stillness here, no pause or hesitation. Survival demands motion. Warmth seeps downward, the earliest sign of morning. As temperature climbs, workers activate in synchronized layers, their bodies arranged with a precision that seems impossible for individuals acting alone. Some form protective barriers. Others prepare to scout. Deeper in the inner chamber, workers rotate into position around the single being whose survival outweighs their own, the queen. She is immense, monolithic compared to her tireless attendants. Her swollen abdomen anchors her to the nest like a shimmering core, heavy with life and potential. She cannot walk, cannot forage, cannot defend herself. But she doesn't need to. An entire nation of bodies organizes its existence around her safety. Workers shield her from abrupt drafts, from temperature swings, from the faintest hint of danger. Their movements form a living armor that is constantly renewed, layer after layer, heartbeat after heartbeat. Nearby, pale larvae hang gently from mandibles like delicate pearls. Brood workers shift them with extraordinary care, calibrating their positions to pockets of ideal warmth. They test the air, adjusting the brood whenever the slightest imbalance threatens. In this world, a few degrees of heat or a moment of unguarded exposure can mean collapse. But the colony has evolved to counter uncertainty with relentless order. Mist curls along the ground as foragers begin to emerge from the nest. They climb over bark softened by the night's humidity, pause, and raise their antennae to drink in the dawn. Every vibration matters. Every scent carries meaning. Even before the sun breaches the canopy, pathways begin to form. The colony expands outward in arcs, thin at first, then thickening into exploratory branches that sweep the forest floor. These early scouts interpret the forest through tremors and chemical trails. A beetle shifting its weight on a distant leaf, a worm burrowing under damp soil, a small insect brushing against moss. All send signals that ripple outward. The scouts register them instantly. Behind them, deeper columns of workers activate, their movements gaining momentum. The forest floor transforms into a series of interconnected search zones. While larger animals still sleep, this miniature world is already alive with purpose. Far beneath the emerging sunlight, inside the nest's dim interior, workers strengthen the living walls that protect the queen and brood. Some form bridges across uneven passages. Others repair buckled surfaces created by shifting soil. These rituals happen every morning, each one essential. Above them, the forest begins to glow. The canopy divides the rising sun into warm rays that cut through mist. Light scatters across mossy logs, ferns unfurl in slow shivers, and droplets glitter like suspended stars. The air thickens with warmth, and the subtle ecosystem underfoot responds. Sensing this shift, the colony begins its march. The initial movement is slow, almost ceremonial. Workers tighten formation, aligning into smooth, living currents. They flow over roots, around stones, across decaying leaves with mechanical precision. Where gaps open in the terrain, workers fill them instantly. Where the ground dips sharply, layers of bodies form ramps. Every inch of progress is facilitated by collective effort. The queen remains buried in the warm core, her attendants maintaining a protective globe as the colony transitions from rest to navigation. Brood workers keep the larvae suspended above shifting soil, rocking gently in sync with the colony's movement. Chemical signals pulse back from the front lines. Activity detected. Scouts have sensed the faint tremor of prey moving through the undergrowth. At first, the vibrations are small, scattered, difficult to interpret. But then a sharper tremble triggers the workers' instinctive response. The formation begins to tilt in a new direction. The entire colony shifts. Not with chaos, not with confusion, but with fluid precision. The river of bodies redirects, narrowing into a more focused corridor. Foragers fan out to intercept potential escape routes. Workers groom larvae mid-march, preventing mold or parasites from taking hold. Every action flows into the larger mission: secure food, protect the brood, maintain momentum. As sunlight strengthens, humidity rises. Shadows stretch long across the forest floor. Workers adjust their positions, forming living walls to shield the brood from intense patches of light. The terrain ahead grows tangled, thick roots knotted into steep ridges, moss-slick slopes, and broken leaf beds. Scouts test each potential crossing, tapping surfaces, reading scent patterns, interpreting micro-vibrations. Finally, a stable path is identified. The column pivots gracefully. The forest floor shivers. Prey is close. The swarm is ready. The forest holds its breath as the colony shifts direction. Vibrations roll ahead like distant thunder, traveling through roots and loose soil. Every worker feels it, an instinctive tightening of the collective body. Signals pass from antenna to antenna, each transmission sharpening the swarm's focus. Somewhere beneath a curtain of damp leaves, something living stirs. The scent trails drifting through the undergrowth grow stronger with every inch of ground the colony crosses. Workers at the front accelerate. They climb over ridges of curled bark, descend along slopes padded with moss, then fan outward into an arc that widens with predatory precision. Behind them, carriers adjust their spacing, ensuring the brood remains suspended safely above the shifting terrain. Sunlight thickens across the forest floor as the canopy opens in patches, exposing glistening beads of dew that stretch like tiny mirrors beneath the rising heat. The prey trembles again. A faint quiver, barely there, slides beneath the forest's ambient hum. But to the swarm, it is unmistakable. The leading workers freeze for a split second, antennae raised high. Then the formation begins to tighten, the arc pulling inward like a tightening net. The pace increases. Bodies move with crisp certainty. Every path, every angle, every gap in the forest litter is accounted for. The prey bolts. A sudden burst of movement breaks through the leaves, sending droplets scattering and loose debris flying. The swarm reacts instantly. Forward lines collapse inward. Workers surge from multiple directions. The entire colony seems to ignite. Their momentum builds into a wave of coordinated acceleration. The prey darts between two fractured pieces of bark, but the escape route is already cut off. Workers flood in from the flanks. One clamps onto its hind leg, another to its thorax. The prey thrashes wildly, tossing fragments of leaf into the air, but the tightening perimeter allows no retreat. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands converge. The attack lasts only seconds, but its echo, its raw precision, ripples across the forest floor like a living storm. When the struggle ends, silence returns just as quickly. Workers waste no time. Dismantling begins immediately. Powerful mandibles shear through membranes, separating the prey into manageable pieces. Retrieval lines form in fluid succession. Each segment of the prey becomes a link in a long biological chain, passed backward with practiced economy. Carriers grip the fragments tightly and begin the trek back toward the bivouac, climbing over roots, soil, and leaves without ever slowing their rhythm. Meanwhile, deeper in the swarm, brood workers rotate inward to receive the incoming nourishment. They treat each fragment like a precious offering. Younger larvae receive softer parts. Older larvae get more substantial pieces. Mandibles grind, shape, and prepare the food with careful precision. Attendants check temperature pockets beneath bark, adjusting larvae accordingly. Every motion ensures survival. But the forest is restless. As daylight swells, shadows begin to sharpen. The mist lingering above the ground thins, revealing shifting silhouettes beyond the colony's path. Leafcutters move quietly along their own trails, cutting clean segments of greenery without acknowledging the swarm's presence. A beetle hesitates near the edge of a moss-covered log. One of the colony's scouts confronts it. The beetle flares briefly, then retreats into darkness. Workers at the outer perimeter pause. A new tremor, deeper, more irregular, vibrates through the soil. The pattern doesn't match typical prey. It feels heavier, more erratic. The forest's ambient hum briefly wavers. The tremor grows. Then comes a sharp crack, distant but unmistakable. Something large shifts in the shadow of a fallen branch. Workers tighten formation, their antennae angled toward the sound. The brood is shielded instantly, tucked deep within the colony's warm core. Layers of workers form barriers on every side. But the threat doesn't advance. After several long moments, the vibrations soften and disappear entirely. The colony resumes movement, cautious but undeterred. With midday warmth rising, humidity clings densely to the air. The ground softens. Workers push forward as the terrain dips into a shallow gully. Moss thickens beneath them, muffling vibrations, making signals harder to interpret. Scouts spread wider, relying on scent trails to compensate. Foragers climb upward along a decaying log, tracing its length until it breaks into rotting fragments that crumble under their feet. A new scent pulses through the colony, a strong, fresh trail. Not prey, but something close enough to warrant attention. The signal spreads instantly. The formation pivots. Ahead, beyond a cluster of low ferns, movement stirs. Leaves shift, scattering beads of dew. A shadow pushes against the undergrowth, then emerges in a series of jerky movements. It is larger than the first prey, more agile, more aware. The prey leaps, kicking through a sheet of mist. The chase ignites once more. Workers charge with precision. The forest floor becomes a battlefield of fog and frantic motion. The prey bounds across tangled vines, landing unevenly on a damp patch of soil. A swarm of workers floods toward it. One worker clamps onto its leg. The prey thrashes violently, but the momentum has shifted. The swarm overtakes it. The second kill comes faster than the first. The forest returns to its slow breath. Fog settles again. Workers begin dismantling the prey, carrying fragments methodically toward the bivouac. But as the retrieval lines begin their march home, a new vibration travels through the soil. This tremor is different, deeper, heavier, and strangely rhythmic. It is not from prey. It is from the colony's own nest. The bivouac is in danger. Inside the newly formed night chamber, structural pressure has begun to shift. Soil walls tremble. Dust spills in thin curtains. The queen's attendants feel the change first. Something is wrong. High inside the living structure, a corridor compresses sharply. Workers brace themselves. Cracks widen. The brood platform heaves. The entire chamber shakes with violent internal tremors that ripple through every connected tunnel. The colony turns back at once, retrieving lines accelerating their pace. Workers form protective chains. Something catastrophic is unfolding inside their home, and they must reach it before it collapses. The vibrations intensify with every step the colony takes. Workers once focused on retrieval now break formation, accelerating toward the bivouac as dust drifts upward in fragmented plumes. The forest floor feels unstable beneath them, an unfamiliar tremor that radiates from their own nest like an urgent alarm signal. Something deep inside the living structure is failing. Scouts returning to the colony's perimeter sense the instability first. They tap the ground, receiving erratic echoes. Soil shifts under their weight. Fungal threads rupture. Even the faint temperature pockets that brood workers rely on have begun to warp. The scent of disturbed earth bleeds into the air, sharper and more chaotic than anything produced by prey or predator. The bivouac is collapsing. Inside, chaos unfolds in dim, dust-choked chambers. Workers rush to stabilize the brood, forming chains of linked bodies to support sagging walls. Larvae twist restlessly, sensing the danger. A section of the ceiling compresses violently, sending a shudder through the lower corridors. Workers brace themselves, anchoring their legs against trembling soil, while others climb to reinforce the walls. But the pressure only increases. A deep cracking sound ripples through the nest. The floor shifts. The queen's massive form lurches slightly, and her attendants surge forward, tightening their protective shield around her. They adjust the angle of her body, rotating her toward the nearest exit route they can identify. Above them, the living walls buckle. A fissure tears through an upper archway, showering fine grains of dust downward. Workers scramble to hold the structure together, but the force pressing inward is relentless. They pivot, brace, and interlock their bodies across the gap. Yet the soil continues to crumble. Another tremor strikes. The hive convulses. Dust erupts through the corridor like a sudden storm. Workers cling to each other as the ground tilts, the entire chamber shifting under the weight of the collapse. One section of the brood platform begins to slide. Workers leap in unison, catching the larvae mid-fall. They cluster around them, forming a shield as the platform crashes downward. A new opening appears, a jagged wound splitting the wall. Daylight spills through the gap. The outer layers of workers immediately understand. This is the escape route. They mobilize with breathtaking speed. Chains of bodies form ramps. Others clear debris, widening the opening by sheer force. Workers surge toward the queen, assembling in layered ranks around her. Attendants guide her forward, urging her toward the breach. Behind them, the living wall groans. Another crack forms, this one deep and final. The upper chamber begins to fold inward. Pressure waves ripple through the structure with violent intensity. The queen's attendants push harder. The exit widens as more workers flood toward it, their bodies forming scaffolds to stabilize the fractured passage. The queen moves slowly, massive, heavy but steady. Every inch of progress is fought for. Her attendants brace against the collapsing walls, absorbing shock waves with their bodies. A section of the ceiling breaks apart entirely. Workers scream silent alarm signals through pheromones. Dust clouds the chamber, but the queen continues to advance. Then, at last, the breach opens wide enough. Light pours in. With a final coordinated surge, the workers propel the queen forward. Her massive form slides across the forest floor as she emerges into open air. Dozens of attendants rush around her to stabilize her weight. Behind her, the brood cluster bursts out of the tunnel, protected by intertwined chains of workers who hold them suspended above falling debris. The old bivouac collapses fully. A thunderous wave of soil, roots, and debris crashes inward, filling the space where the colony had lived only moments before. Dust erupts skyward in a plume that briefly clouds the clearing. The tremors fade. The forest goes quiet, but the colony is already moving. Workers spread outward in all directions, mapping the terrain for a suitable location to rebuild. They test patches of soil, climb roots, evaluate pockets of warmth and moisture. Others circle the queen, adjusting the layers of bodies that shield her from the newly unstable ground. The brood is set down in a temporary ring of workers. Attendants check each larva, grooming away dust and monitoring for injuries. The living shields around them tighten, forming a protective cradle while scouts search for structural anchors. A clearing nearby beckons. The soil is firm. The air is warm. A thick arch of intertwined roots curves above it, providing shelter. At once, workers converge, tapping the ground, carving shallow chambers with their mandibles. They begin constructing the new bivouac, layer by layer, body by body, instinct by instinct. Lines of workers retrieve debris to fortify the new walls. Others weave their bodies into living scaffolds, forming the first skeletal frame. The rhythm of construction intensifies. The colony's collapse has transformed into a synchronized burst of rebuilding. As the new structure rises, the queen is guided toward its warm core. Workers smooth the ground beneath her, clear debris, and widen the entrance. Countless legs move as one. The brood is carried inside. Workers suspend the larvae in a fresh chamber lined with bodies that pulse gently to maintain temperature. Attendants rotate in and out, ensuring stability. The new bivouac hums with energy, coordination, and purpose. Outside, the forest exhales. Mist settles across the clearing. Sunlight filters through patches in the canopy, casting soft golden beams onto the colony's resettled home. Insects resume their quiet movements. The distant trill of birds echoes faintly across the undergrowth. The swarm reorganizes. Foragers spread outward, renewing their arcs. Scouts test new trails. Perimeter workers circle the new structure, reinforcing weak points. Deep inside, the queen rests, surrounded, protected, elevated by thousands of bodies that have carried her through disaster and into renewal. Morning rises again, warm and steady. The colony shifts forward, united, undeterred. And as the forest breathes around them, the swarm continues its ancient rhythm. Always moving, always rebuilding, always surviving.